announced after a 5-year split, the city's Martin Luther King breakfast celebration is reunited. Mayor Donna Deegan announced Monday that the annual celebration will move forward as a joint partnership among the city, the NAACP, the Urban League, and the Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined now by three people who know a lot about that announcement. Dr. Richard Danford, president of the Jacksonville Urban League, joins us in Studio 2. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Isaiah Rumlin, president of the Jacksonville NAACP, joins us on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. And also here in studio, our own Will Brown, reporter for Jacksonville Today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. To our listeners, have you ever attended one of the MLK breakfasts? What do you think about the city's announcement to reunify these dueling celebrations? Give us a call at 549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We also invite you to reach out on social media. You can tag us on X at FCC On Air or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Dr. Danford, let's start with yesterday's announcement, if we can. What is the significance of this decision to return to a single celebration honoring Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. I think it really sends an important message right now. With all that is going on in the world, in this state, in this city, the announcement and the idea that the mayor, our new mayor Deegan, would take it upon herself to bring this community together the best that she can. We certainly at the Urban League supports her efforts in this, and of course we don't see this as a panacea, bringing us together. What we're really looking forward to is what can we do together going forward that will benefit this community, and we're talking about all communities here in Jacksonville.
There's something symbolically important, though, about a unified King breakfast in your mind?
Very much so. We'll probably have other opportunities to honor Martin Luther King. There may be breakfasts, luncheons. Some of our churches have various events, and of course, this year we're going to have some activities coming along as a result of the United Way being involved. So we're excited about that, extending the MLK celebration, into the week as well as into the year, because we've got a lot of work to do here.
Isaiah Rumlin, NAACP president here in Jacksonville, can you remind us how this split began in the first place? What caused the rift initially?
Well, it was the chamber who bailed out on us during Mayor John Payton's final term in office. They called us about 2 months prior to January to inform us that they would no longer be a part of the celebration. So we at that time said, and Richard was right there, Richard said, well, why don't we call the mayor, see if we can get the city involved in it, because we need to do something. I mean, the breakfast has been going on for years at that time. So we met with John. John agreed to join in with us, and everything was fine. We still had conversations as it relates to the programming of the breakfast, as it relates to the planning of the breakfast. And years later on, things kind of changed, wherein it appeared that the city just totally took it over, and to a certain degree just kicked these organizations to the curb. And we just made a bold decision that, hey, we really don't need the city. We can do it ourselves. And we have proven that we can do it, and we know how to do it. So that's how we got to this point where, we were just being ignored. And as Richard, indicated that this breakfast, and I said it yesterday, this breakfast is more than just a handshake. Just like Mr. Hurst's book, it was never about a hot dog and a Coke. Well, this breakfast never was designed to be just a handshake, but it was designed to improve the conditions of this city. And over the years, how certain sections of our community have suffered economically, socially, violence. We can just go on and on and on. And I think until this city council come to the realization of all these issues that we're facing, just one day event not going to cut it.
I hear you on that. And so when the rift initially happened, that was something that was unique to Jacksonville. As the president of the Jacksonville NAACP, I imagine you're in somewhat contact with, other city agents, other branches. Did you hear any feedback from elsewhere about how unusual it was for a city to have a divided celebration honoring Dr. King?
No, I didn't hear anything as it relates to the separation from other branches, because I think most of us have some type of activity all over the country, during this particular period of time.
Will Brown, this is an issue you've covered for a long time now, and always the optics of it were strange, I think, for people inside the city and outside the city. What about this announcement, it provides a corrective to that?
The first thing I always think about when I thought of Jacksonville having two MLK breakfasts is that St. Augustine, a city where Dr. King was arrested, a city that was notorious for people pouring acid in pools, a city that a number of folks will say off the record still has race issues, black folks will say off the record, has one MLK breakfast. And Jacksonville had to have two. People in St. Augustine, regardless of where they stood on the political spectrum, regardless of where they stood in reference to civil rights, in terms of economic development, workforce opportunities, found a way to come together. And if it can happen in St. Augustine, then it was all the more shocking that it couldn't happen in Jacksonville. Mr. Rumlin said something that was fascinating yesterday, and I thought it was spot on. Was he mentioned that hate is something that takes away from everyone. He mentioned that yesterday. And, I think back personally to, I walked through downtown Birmingham this summer, a few weeks before the Dollar General shooting. And it was just so shocking to me. Mr. Rumlin and Mr. Danford were obviously alive when the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing took place. But as a person who wasn't alive, it was shocking just how much the hate infected that city. And it's not to say that's the case here, but to Mr. Rumlin's point, hate is something that can infect all of us if there are not things to be done to correct it. And I think Mr. Rumlin, Mr. Danford, and Mayor Deegan all said that this breakfast is one step in having conversations that may not be easy in terms of eradicating hate.
So,
and I think there's another thing, and excuse me for interrupting you, but I think that's another thing as it relates to the uncomfortability of people. If Dr. King was alive today and he was in his youth, he would not be invited to this breakfast as a guest speaker, because he would make people feel uncomfortable. And we don't like to feel uncomfortable. We like to be, be in that vacuum that we're in. And this is part of our problem. Folks don't want to, they don't want to move from that uncomfortable stage that they're in.
Dr. Danford, what do you think about that? Would Martin Luther King be welcome at his breakfast were he to be alive today?
Wow, that's just an interesting question. Let me go back to the days. I grew up in South Georgia, and my father had a dry cleaners. And when Martin Luther King and the other civil rights workers would come through my town, My father would clean his suits. He would dry clean his suits. And and so when I go through the Atlanta airport and they have this exhibit of Martin Luther King and some of the suits he wore back in the day, it does my heart good because, I feel that not only my family, but I personally had a lot to do with assisting Dr. King with some of his goals. So, but going forward, and we can talk about the past on and on and on, and we've got a lot of skeletons. We've got a lot of history there. Obviously, some people want us to forget the history. We will never forget the history, but we have to think going forward. So my point is, as we come together, these organizations in the city, the chamber, the NAACP, the Urban League, what do we do going forward? How, rather than just talking about the healing that needs to take place in this community, what are we doing tangibly? And I'm not necessarily talking about shaking hands and singing "We Shall Overcome." What is happening to the people in our community, the less than, the marginalized people? What is happening in city government, the rules that exist that preclude certain people, certain communities from participating in the processes of city government. So going forward, then, that's something that Martin Luther King would love to see happening, okay? He would love to see all of us coming together to figure out how we can better the lives of those people that really need the help.
So Monday's press conference, Mayor Deegan spoke about this is a step forward. Let's hear a little bit about what she had to say about this announcement.
We are closing that chapter. It is a new day. We are returning to one Martin Luther King Jr. unity breakfast moving forward. This does not mean we have to always agree, and certainly we will not. It does mean that when we are in loving dialogue with each other, and when we take the time to listen, truly listen to each other, we are more likely to find common ground to move our city forward.
Will Brown, this announcement was a partnership that the city and the chamber is getting back involved. Daniel Davis, who opposed Mayor Deegan in the mayoral race, who's the president of the chamber, was there. What does that tell you about his willingness to come to the table? Was there any symbolic significance for that?
And this is a credit to Mr. Davis and Mayor Deegan, is publicly, he expressed his appreciation for the way that she has treated him, and he expressed his appreciation for her and she likewise expressed her appreciation for the way that he has conducted himself from a personal level as well as a professional level in terms of working with the business community. I remember something that Mr. Rumlin said last year about the separate breakfasts was about the lack of investment in the north side and the west side specifically. And that is one area where the mayor and the chamber can potentially work together when businesses are considering coming to Jacksonville, is to consider the north and the west side, because that was something that led to the initial rift. That is something that is beyond a handshake. So that is something that could, moving forward, be some an area that the mayor and potentially the chamber or Jax USA or other business-centric organizations work together to benefit the entirety of Jacksonville.
We should say we did reach out to the chamber to see if Daniel Davis could join us. He was not available, but he did say that having a unified breakfast is good for all of Jacksonville and for the business community. We have an email from Mitzi. She said, "I'm so glad there will only be one City of Jacksonville MLK breakfast this year. I attended when it was only one, and I stopped attending when the city wouldn't listen to the NAACP leaders. Too bad the Mayor Curry administration couldn't look beyond politics and reach across the color spectrum to do the right thing." Richard Danford, how much of this do you lay at the feet of the former mayor, this rift for 5 years?
Well, there's quite a bit that we can lay at the feet, okay? And I won't go there. Let me say that all politicians are different. Our former mayor had an agenda, and it did not necessarily include black folk and those communities that are being marginalized. His emphasis has been and was strictly on the business community, strictly on developing downtown, the stadium, that whole area from a business perspective. That was his priority. And we talked to the mayor, early in his administration. And the sense that we got from him was that we were not really welcome and included. And so it is very hard. It is very difficult running a nonprofit organization, when, there are legislative barriers that help preclude us from doing the work that we need to do. And I'm talking about having access to funding opportunities.
We have a call, Diana in the Bay Meadows area. Good morning, Diana. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm really happy to hear about the combined Martin Luther King event. But I think if he were here today, he'd talk about some of the things that aren't fair for some of the people in the city. For example, they paid the mansions on the river to their houses to be raised 4 feet. And we have difficulty getting sewer systems and proper water to parts of the city in the north side and the west side. And I'd just like to hear that something is going to go on this event that will speak to some of the unfairness and the needs that need to be addressed.
Thanks very much for that call. We appreciate it, Diana. Isaiah Rumlin, you said that this is, more than a handshake, this event. But what does it say to the what does a unified breakfast, if anything, say about the partnership that this city is willing to engage in, and what it says about Mayor Deegan's priorities?
I think Mayor Deegan is in the right spot at the right time. It is not going to come from the mayor's office. It's going to have to come from the business community. We're getting ready to spend $1 billion for a stadium renovation. But at the same time, we can't find enough money, even raising taxes, to deal with our homeless situation in this city. I mean, I mentioned several issues yesterday. The health disparities that we continue to experience in our community. And I'm not only talking about the African-American community, I'm talking about the community in general, because all of us are one people. And we have our, poor white friends, we have our less fortunate black friends, but all of us are in this together. And until this business community come together and support these issues that the mayor is trying to deal with, I think that's where you're going to start seeing some changes.
And to that point, I think 3 years ago this week, the Jack's Chamber announced its Lewis and White initiative, named after A.L. Lewis and Eartha White, which really focused on black businesses and helping black businesses understand how to get certified and how to be able to earn and win city contracts, so they could go through that process. So it might not so it was obviously not a handout in any way, stretch, or form, but if it's helping person A go understand the process so they can earn a $100,000 contract, well, that's a way for them to be able to feed their family and hire more employees. Now, my understanding from the Lewis and White initiative, to go back to the point about business, is it's really been, when I say networking of putting small business owners in front of larger companies so they can be more subprime contractors, so they can learn the process to eventually become prime contractors. That's been the biggest key. Obviously, the chamber, chamber officials themselves and even the mayor's office and most people admit that there's obviously more that can and should be done, but that has been a step that I've heard from small businesses has been useful over the last 3 years.
We've got a call. Stanley on the north side. Good morning, Stanley. Go ahead. You're on First Coast Connect.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I do not agree with the breakfast because this city for 54 years has disenfranchised African Americans, and nothing have been done. A breakfast is not going to change the landscape of this city. This is a very racist city. And when I talk about racism, I'm talking about when the city government, yes, and city council, when you're talking about redistricting, when you're talking about putting a morgue in a community, when you out there giving money to people who are paying for moving forward, not moving the community forward, especially on the north side over there. There's many issues, over 50 pathology that need to take a place over in the north side that the city for over 54 years have not addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Appreciate it. Dr. Danford, your thoughts?
Wow, there's just so much tied into this. And, I would hate to see us put all of the impetus, put everything on bringing us together, the breakfast, which is very, very important. As Isaiah mentioned, going forward, what do? We know what the problems are. We know what the ills are. We know really how to address them, but do we have the will? And regardless of whether we have the will, I'm talking about those of us at the Jacksonville Urban League and other organizations, we're just constantly grinding, looking for opportunities to improve this community. So we will certainly use this coming together period as an opportunity to spring forward us, to a point that we can see some tangible results in our communities.
Isaiah Rumlin, do you think that this breakfast will be special in some way? Do you think it will be better attended? Do you think that it will be, newly dynamic, I guess, because of the fact that it's come back together?
We should see an increase in attendance. Yes. There are those, disagree with us, and coming back, and having one so-called MLK breakfast, because really Jacksonville is large enough to have as many breakfasts as they want to. Even the Baptist Ministers Conference, they still have that breakfast. But we have just built this label, MLK, breakfast. It got to a point where it was the breakfast, but in spite of all these other issues, but I think you will see somewhat of increase in attendance this year. Yes.
Dr. Danford, I'm curious. I know that initial split occurred sort of over political differences with the former mayor administration, but did this in any way divide the Black community?
It did. To be honest, from my perspective, there was quite a bit of an effort to divide our community. We've seen it played out over the last few years, particularly as it relates to the city council in terms of what it concentrates on and the issues that they get involved in. But a lot of what happens in Jacksonville is as a result of what's happening around the country and in this state. So it just appears to me, as Isaiah said earlier, it's going to, we say that it's going to take the business community, but what is the business? Who is the business community? It's going to take all of us. But from my perspective, I believe that we need to remove the barriers that get in the way of people participating in the processes of government, rather than us looking for someone to help us, give us the tools, allow us to sit at the table, allow us to apply for the funding that comes through the city. There's so much growth happening in Jacksonville, Florida. Everybody's trying to get here. even though we have hate symbols flying around the stadium and on our buildings, and these are all distractions, and we have many distractions in our community to keep marginalized communities from bringing themselves up, from lifting themselves. So we need to help and continue to provide the tools that people need in these places that are neglected, such that they can learn how to take care of themselves.
And Will, as Dr. Danford alluded to, I mean, there has been a rise in hate speech and hateful conduct. Just this week, billboards were vandalized, billboards in support of, put up by supporters of the Jewish community, and covered with anti-Semitic slurs. There was a mass shooting just in August that was targeting the Black community. Does this breakfast symbolically have anything to do with Jacksonville's will and motivation to be unified on racial issues?
I don't know if that's for me to say. There have been so many people who've lived in Jacksonville a lot longer than I have. But I when I think of MLK breakfasts, I think of so many times folks mention Dr. King's March on Washington, his speech in 1963, and they call it the March on Washington speech when the full title of it was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom.
Right.
And the part of the speech that's always mentioned is the freedom part,
right,
but not the part where he advocates for jobs.
Right.
And that's the speech that's always mentioned. But, there's a quote from his last public utterance, which was April of 1968 in Memphis, where he talked almost exclusively about economic injustice.
Poverty.
Right.
And striking workers.
And that's why he was assassinated.
Well, you were there and I was not.
Well, actually, April 4th, 1968, I was in Vietnam when Martin Luther King was killed. Okay, so you can imagine a Black man from South Georgia in 1968 in Vietnam getting shot at. And in this country, my folk were getting shot at. So, we've had to fight 2 wars. And, and I tell you, after 32 years with the Urban League and others, it has been a heavy lift. And going forward, I'm hopeful that we won't have to do the things that we've done in the past. Why can't there's enough in this country to share? There's too much greed. There's too much hate. Why is it that the people with the money or the developers or whomever that want it all? And it's sad what is happening in our communities, particularly around the housing issue. Okay, Black folk are losing their homes by developers, and the developers have gotten the city to provide the funding for them to assist, in this whole process. And what you have is that our people are losing any semblance of wealth because our wealth is tied up in our homes if we have a house. So, I commend the mayor for looking at the housing situation in this community because people are suffering. They can't pay their bills, and we've got to find opportunities for them to get the resources to help themselves.
So Russ and Riverside wanted information about how to attend the Martin Luther King Jr. Unity Breakfast. Will be at 7 a.m. on January 12th, 2024 at the Prime Osborne Convention Center. Thanks so much to Dr. Danford of the Urban League, Isaiah Rumlin of the NAACP in Jacksonville, Will Brown, Jacksonville Today. Appreciate you all being here, a part of this conversation.
Thank you for having us.